Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Ocamb, and I'm a longtime journalist with the LGBTQ community. With me is Max Huskins. He's a millennial ally, director, and content creator from Ukraine. 2 years ago, Max and I produced a YouTube series called Race to the Midterm. It was our effort to help save democracy. This year, we're beyond concerned that Donald Trump might win in November.
I don't know, which would you rather be, a dumb person or a dictator? I don't know, perhaps a dictator would be better. I don't want to be a dumb person. But we cannot be satisfied merely to turn back the clock to 2020 or 2019. The potential of our movement and the Republican Party itself is so much greater than that. The path back to American unity is not to surrender the culture wars. The path back to national unity is to decisively win the culture wars. Thank you. That includes winning the war to restore free speech in America. We're going to need majority regulatory and legal changes under the next administration. Has to happen.
So this is our effort to do something. Today, we're focusing on the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz chant, "We won't go back."
I feel still very shamed about it because I was raised in the 50s and, it's ingrained in me. And I was 17. I had no choices in my life. I didn't have a lot of family support in any way, or finances. I had graduated from high school, but had no one ever said, go, how about college? How about, nothing. I didn't know what was going to be. And then I found out I was pregnant. Luckily, I had a family doctor who was a friend of the family, and he drove me and his wife and my mother in their brand new Cadillac, to Tijuana. And we parked on a really scrungy looking street. It was scary. And he parked about 3 blocks away and said, see that building down there? And he gave me an envelope with money and with cash. And I was to walk into that building and give them the cash and then come right back to him. And I guess he thought if I were dying, maybe he could help me. And it was beyond hideous and life altering. I had no anesthetic. There was a technician giving me a few puffs of ether, but he would then take it away. So it just made my arms and legs feel numb and weird, but I felt everything, how much pain I was in. And then I realized that the technician was actually molesting me. So I had to figure out, how can I make my arms move to push him away? And, so it was just, this absolute pit of shame. And I then when it was finished, they said, go, 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 like the building was on fire. And they didn't want me there. It was illegal, And my doctor, I'm sure his generosity and his bravery, because he would have lost his license, if anyone had found out. And more probably, because I was too naive to know anything. I had never been out of the state. I'd never been on an airplane. And fate, something glorious outside of ourselves, whatever you believe, reached in. And a few months after that, I began auditions. I didn't have an agent. I wasn't really an actor. I'd been doing it in high school constantly. And I began auditioning, and by the end of that year, I was Gidget. I was the quintessential all-American girl next door. And the thing that I wrote about in the book, in reality, I was the quintessential all-American girl next door, because so many young women, my generation of women, were going through this. And these are the things that women are going through now. When they're, trying to get to another state, they don't have the money, they don't have the means, and they don't know where they're going. And it's beyond how you can go back to that and do that to our little girls and our young women, and not have respect and regard for their health and their own decisions about whether they feel they're able to give birth to a child at that time. We can't go back. We can't go back. We have to all stand up and fight. And that was that lovely story.
I got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Do we want a future where our daughters have fewer rights than our grandmothers? Where their bodies are state property? Their voices silenced? Their opportunities erased? We say hell no. We won't go back.
But we won't go back means something literally existential to us. Trump's team plans to go way back to the 1950s when white straight Christian men ruled everything. Women and children were totally subjugated to men. Government made personal decisions for individuals. And despite the 10 Commandments, God gave biblical permission to kill LGBTQ people. Additionally, Trump's Project 2025 playbook calls for a complete erasure of what they call the evil terms sexual orientation, gender identity, in every single federal government document. The implications are staggering. Max is worried too. Trump loves Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and hates Ukraine, which only became independent in 1991. So going back means Max's family and friends would be forced to live under the yoke of Putin's Russia. With all the book bans and copycat don't say gay laws, it's understandable if most LGBT young people don't know how bad it was for us in the 1950s. So here's a look at how anti-LGBTQ hatred originated back then, setting the stage for Trump's Project 2025 and what they're proposing now. In the 1940s, World War II enabled isolated and closeted gay people an opportunity to find each other while fighting the German Nazis and Japanese imperialists. Many died for the freedom of others in foreign lands. But homosexuals were considered unfit for military service, what the Army called the stigmata of degeneration and sexual perversion. According to the book Coming Out Under Fire, one Army doctor used tongue depressors to identify sexual psychopaths, concluding that 89% of homosexuals who performed oral sex didn't have a gag reflex. In 1944, the War Department started issuing blue discharges to those with undesirable traits of character. Military personnel suspected of being latent homosexuals. According to University of Michigan historian Jennifer Dominique Jones, Black soldiers bore the brunt of the blue discharges. Jones analyzed a trove of NAACP records and concluded that Black soldiers were more likely to be scrutinized, discriminated against, and given more extreme punishments for relatively minor infractions. They received 22% of all blue discharges, more than double their proportional share of the military at the time. President Harry Truman officially ended racial segregation in the armed services in 1948, but the blue discharges prevented service members from getting GI benefits, finding jobs, or being welcomed home. World War II officially ended in 1945 after the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, killing between 150,000 and 246,000 people, mostly civilians. After the Soviet Union, America's former ally in World War II, tested their own atomic bomb, President Truman ordered production of an even more destructive weapon, the hydrogen bomb. The US and Soviet Union started a deadly arms race. resulting in a high-stakes Cold War. Americans believed the Red Menace was real. The threat of annihilation without warning and the insidious, difficult-to-detect communist takeover was everywhere. To calm anxiety while also preparing the country for the possibility of nuclear war, Truman ordered civil defense films like Duck and Cover to teach young people how to protect themselves from an atomic bomb blast.
First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you were not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover like Bert, you will be much safer.
What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
The government lied. They knew from nuclear tests on fake towns that the blast from an atomic explosion was devastating.
Scenes typical of the American family at home. First floor living room. Children at play, unaware of approaching disaster.
Meanwhile, the press reported on radiation sickness in Japan, of human beings rotting from the inside out. Anxious Americans shuddered imagining the new atomic age. It is during this time in the early 1950s that government and police started warning about insidious homosexual pedophiles lurking in public.
Jimmy hadn't enjoyed himself so much in a long time. Then during lunch, Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
Government witch hunts, the Lavender Scare, started in February 1950 when first-term Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy waved a piece of paper during a Republican Women's Club meeting in Wheeling, West Virginia. Evidence, he said, of 205 known communists in the State Department. They were the enemy within. The next day, McCarthy changed the number to 57 communists. Later that month, on the Senate floor, McCarthy referred to hundreds of copies of old, outdated loyalty dossiers of employees who no longer worked at the State Department. He specifically identified 2 cases involving homosexuals who he claimed were susceptible to communist recruitment because of their peculiar mental twists, making a direct link between communists and homosexuals.
Homosexuals must not be handling top secret material.
The press jumped on the story.
Committee will please come to order.
During the years of the Red Scare, the halls of Congress resonated with this question.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
The interrogations played out before a national audience. But far from the Klieg lights and the newsreel cameras, another question was being asked.
2 civil service investigators came in, and they said, "We have information which leads us to believe you are homosexual. Do you have any comment?"
In a country gripped by fear and paranoia, the federal government declared gay men and lesbians were a threat to national security.
And homosexuals were drummed out of jobs everywhere, not only out of the federal government, not only out of security positions, but out of jobs everywhere.
Author David K. Johnson described the Lavender Scare.
I describe it as a fear, right? A fear that permeated Cold War political culture. This fear that gay people were a threat to national security, that they had infiltrated the federal government, and that they needed to be systematically removed from government service.
Congressional investigations were launched in every federal agency, with compliance demanded of civilian consultants and contractors. Additionally, the FBI ordered local police records of homosexual arrests, looking for violators. Suicides were common. But it was the otherwise obscure Senate Committee on Expenditures in the executive departments that conducted the largest investigation. In their December 15, 1950 report, Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in Government, the Senate Hoey Committee claimed to have found almost 5,000 homosexuals in the military and civilian workforces over 3 years. While McCarthy and his cruel, closeted gay counsel Roy Cohn and the Republican-led House Un-American Activities Committee created public panic with their communist honey crusades, the widely distributed Hoey Committee report officially branded homosexuals as risks to national security. But here's the thing. While the Red Scare named names and hyped scandals, the Lavender Scare generated no similar public congressional spectacles. Instead, there was a constant, anonymous, amorphous buzz about insidious communists and sexual predators who look like your neighbor, your coworkers, your children's teacher, but were secretly amoral aliens, devoid of humanity, lying in wait to take over America from within. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers was one of many film allegories for this dark moral panic over the dangerous twin monsters of communism and homosexuality. Jess Womack writes, quote, "The spores in the body snatchers are the insidious predator lurking within the community."
Jack! Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know. Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
From city to city, an incredible hysterical panic spreads. As the unimaginable becomes real, the impossible becomes true.
Stop and listen! Stop and listen to me! Listen! Listen! Listen to me! They're not human! Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Adding to the horror was the medical conclusion that homosexuals were mentally ill. In 1948, Alfred Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male posited a common sexual fluidity with varying gradations. Quote, "Males do not represent two discrete populations, heterosexual and homosexual," he wrote. "The living world is a continuum in each and every one of its aspects." Georgetown University psychiatry professor Captain George Rains told the Hoey Committee that he had known 1,000 well-adjusted gay people. Quote, "The homosexual in the drawing room is quite a different individual than the homosexual the psychiatrist sees in his office. Only sick people go to a doctor," he said. But Rains was also the chair of the American Psychiatric Association's Committee on Nomenclature and Statistics in 1952, when the APA published their first Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The DSM classified homosexuality as a psychopathic personality disturbance. That didn't help homosexuals who endured shock therapy and lobotomies, among other tortures, to cure them of this illness. We won't go back to that, but Trump's team is trying. Now Project 2025 says, we're the monsters hidden in the words, and we must be eradicated.
As the Heritage Foundation's president, Dr. Kevin Roberts boldly and courageously states in the Mandate for Leadership, the next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulations, and piece of legislation that exists.
This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming.
But here's the thing. We are not monsters. We are a people. We are an intersectional cultural minority with a history of struggle, of love, and of joy. In the 1950s, while they were hunting us down, we were starting to see ourselves as an oppressed cultural minority. Harry Hay founded the Mattachine Society in 1950. Mattachine led to One Institute in 1952. In 1958, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that One magazine was not obscene, allowing positive gay content to be distributed through the U.S. mail. But it was a big gay poem that helped inspire the sexual liberation movement of the 1960s. In 1955, out-gay Beat Generation poet Alec Ginsberg wrote Howl, a raging, sacred, and profane poem about America. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, owner of City Lights bookstore in San Francisco, published Howl and was arrested on obscenity charges. After a long trial, the judge decided the poem was not obscene, saying, quote, "Would there be any freedom of press or speech if one must reduce his vocabulary to vapid, innocuous euphemism?" Remember how when Project 2025 says we are essentially pornographic and should be criminalized. Laugh defiantly as you vote. That's it for us. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors. And its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back.